This episode is proudly supported by OpenTable.
Nearly 1/3 of diners are booking same day. So they're making those decisions on the spot. And 10% are making their bookings within just a few hours. And so it's why it's so important to have booking software like OpenTable, which allows your diners to discover you. And so when restaurants are on platforms like OpenTable, they're much more likely to be discovered. We help diners to connect to restaurants. Ultimately, having technology, using technology, helps you to reattach to those diners.
Experience the power of OpenTable. For an exclusive offer, visit restaurant.opentable.com.au/DITW.
Our whole thing is we grow the plant, like get the seeds and replant, so we have a consistent product. We're finding that people actually understanding that it's not just a piece of green or like that kind of thing. It's actually got a flavour and it's actually got a purpose to actually be on the plates.
This is The Producers. I'm Dani Valent. Lots of chefs talk about foraging these days, but what about someone who makes foraging their whole business? Liam Spurrell grew up in the hills on Melbourne's outskirts, where he now forages consistently and carefully, picking hundreds of herbs, fruits and plants and delivering them to top restaurants. Up at dawn, he and his small team are able to gather in the morning and have ingredients on Melbourne restaurant tables in time for lunch. It's about flavour, creativity, a narrative and, more than anything, a tangible connection to nature.
So I'm Liam Spurrell and I'm the director of Spurrell Foraging. So we used to be based out of a place called Warrandyte, which is about 40 minutes east of Melbourne, until over COVID. Just before COVID, we bought a farm out in Sylvan, which is out the back of Mount Dandenong in the start of the Yarra Valley, which is about an hour out of Melbourne. So we're slowly moving up to here because at Warrandyte we had 1 acre, but at Sylvan we have 18.5 acres. So there's just a lot more to work with and a lot more room to expand. So we basically sell like garnishes and native ingredients and everything to restaurants that's a bit different, that's a bit harder to get your hands on. So we still go out and actually forage in the wild for about 40% of our price list, and for about the 60%, we either grow it ourselves or we do work with a few groups in Adelaide that so we can get native fruits and that kind of stuff.
Liam always wanted to be a chef and started working in kitchens as a teenager. Even during his very first weekend job at Vue de Monde, he began his days by foraging plants to take to the restaurant.
I grew up in a place called Park Orchards, which is like 500 metres from where our Warrandyte farm is, so very local. And then when I started cooking, I was 14, working in some restaurants. So my first introduction to a restaurant was one of my brothers worked at Vue de Monde at the time. And then we had the head chef of Vue de Monde at the time, Corey Campbell, just came out to the area because it's a bit more of a wild area. We backed onto a park that was 100 acres and he just wanted to see what was around. So I was 14 at the time and I think I wanted to be a chef since I was about 6. So I just asked him, can I come in every Saturday and just see what it's like? And he went, yeah, sure, as long as you bring in your, some of these things, all our herbs and that. So every Saturday morning I'd start picking and taking into the restaurants and actually seeing what it was like and that kind of thing. So from about 14 to 15-ish, I was doing every Saturday at Vue de Monde. That was when it still was at Normanby Chambers, just about to transfer up to where Rialto is, where it is now. And then because my brother was working there, I kind of wanted to not be someone's brother at the time. So I actually went to Cutler & Co. for almost 5 years after that. So that was a great place to work out with JP and Chris Watson. So they were my 2 head chefs at the time. So we worked really well with them, and I was always still going out picking and making sure we had all the strange and things that no one else had. So after that, I went back to Bistro Vue for a bit, for about a year. That was just to work on getting more of my classic techniques a bit better. So I worked there for a year. and then went back to View de Monde for about a year, and that was when Stevie Naran was head chef there. So I was there for about a year, and then I was actually thinking of going to Sydney to work for a bit. And then I was just called up by a friend to work at Estelle by Scott Pickett. So I actually went there to like just help out for a few weeks while I was deciding. Then they offered me a full-time job, and I worked there for about a year. But after a few months there, Josh Pelham just left. And then Stevie Naran, my head chef at View de Monde, came to work with me. So that was one of the places I worked at that I was a bit more, the most hands-on, and actually like really started realizing foraging could actually be a bit more of a career, because we were always talking about it. Like he was talking, you can never really, like, who else has all these ingredients that we can get, because no one does it. So that kind of gave me a thought, like, if I do enough research, why can't I try and turn this into a business? And if like Estelle was the only place that had those ingredients at the time, why can't I start a business and try and bring it to everyone who's interested? So yeah, we started having a thought about that, and then basically I just took the leap and tried it out, and it was for about 2-3 months I was just putting petrol in my car. That's all the money I was making, because I picked up 4 or 5 restaurants in 2 months. So it started off quite slowly, and then from there it was, you got a call by Sean Quaid at Lume at the time, and from there we just went from 5 in 3-4 months to 10 at 6 months to 20 at 8 months, and yeah, really started running from there.
Foraging sounds cool, but it's not as simple as seeing, stopping, picking and eating. Liam explains the rules around foraging and how he ensures the consistency, which is key to getting items on menu.
We actually go out and wild forage for about 40% of our products. So that is, like, we actually go out and find areas where we're allowed to pick, which is always a bit harder, because there's always specific areas you can and can't pick from, just because of laws and to respect the land. And then for the rest of it, just because we supply all the restaurants, our whole philosophy is like try and get consistency in everything for the restaurants, because I'm a former chef. I know the hardest thing to do is make sure you get the same thing every day, day in, day out, to garnish all the same dishes. So that's why we actually started growing things. So if we have a storm or something and one of our batches gets destroyed, we still have one, like a backup here, that we can actually keep going and keep trying to supply like to everyone so they get what they want. So it's more like you can't go into certain nature reserves or state parks. So it's that kind of thing, like, and around beaches. So it's like that. But you can forage on what's called Queensland, which is Kingsland now, which would be like nature strips and all that kind of thing, like, and just like sides of the roads and certain little forests. You have to do a lot of research to actually find out where you can and can't pick, which was, when I started the business, was the whole thing. It was about 4 or 5 months of actually just doing research of where I can and can't. So it's just doing that and being informed. And then we do find certain patches that are on private land. We just end up going to ask the owners, like, if they're okay with it. And if they say yes or no, we go from there.
Foraging is a way to source exciting wild-grown plants with robust flavour. Liam collects most produce himself, but when it comes to Indigenous plants, he works with expert Aboriginal-owned businesses in South Australia to ensure ethical supply.
So the biggest ones we get wild, things like all the fennels, like fennel flower, because we wild forage our own fennel pollen. All our things like watercress, and that kind of stuff is all still wild, and like sheep sorrel, wood sorrels, that kind of stuff. We find when you actually go out in the wild, everything tastes a little bit better as well. Because in the kitchens, we always use, I remember I used to use watercress, and it was all like hydroponically grown and everything, and you try it and it just tastes like water basically. But when you actually go out in the wild, you find it actually has a bit more flavour. It has like a big strong pepperiness to it. So you have things like that. And then you get a lot of the natives, like you can find a few lemon myrtles, things like that around. There's just Victoria's a bit hard because all the native plants that people know and like that fruit really well aren't from Victoria. So we do tend to have a few more of the non-natives, but we end up going to get things like Tasmanian mountain pepper, which grows up closer to the alpine region around here. So we have plenty of that coming around too. We work with the two places in South Australia. So it's a place called Something Wild, which is owned by Daniel Motlop. So that's an Indigenous-owned company. So we work quite closely with them because they can get all beach herbs and everything. Because they're like an Indigenous-owned, they have all the permits, which is a lot harder to get in Victoria. And then we also work with a company called Creative Native, who basically work quite closely with a lot of Indigenous communities all over Australia, and they just collate all the like native fruits and that kind of thing. Like they get the Davidson plum, muncheries, basically butternut, all the fruits you can think of, and they collate it and we get it from them. We find it's easier with those guys to do it because in Victoria it's a bit harder to work with Indigenous communities because they're a bit more sparse compared to working with places in like South Australia, Western Australia and Northern Territory areas like that. So we've just basically done all that can do our due diligence, make sure we're not basically taking the piss out of anyone around here, and then working with companies in like over there just to make sure we're getting it from an ethical place and we know exactly where it comes from, and like we know everyone's being treated fairly.
As a former chef, Liam had a pretty good way into many top restaurants. He explains how being fluent in chef speak has been an asset for his business.
Basically, starting business, my first almost 10 customers were just people I used to work with that had become head chefs or owners. So we had that, and then we found that like just by talking to them, it made it a lot easier and a lot more accessible for everyone to actually use, because like you go to someone who like hasn't had any like knowledge about kitchens or anything, or just the way to talk to chefs, chefs are pretty unique in the way they speak to each other. So it's just one of those things. Then just being able to be a bit more creative with it. Like if you have an ingredient and they go, there are a few chefs that like come up to me and they go, I have this dish, what do you recommend? My whole thing is I'll try and go with two things that are pretty standard or quite easily matched, and then go with a few things quite like different or a bit interesting that might work, might not work, just see how they go. So it's always very like good to be able to actually know like which way to go with everything. Say like, yeah, just as I said, being like go the safe way or go something a bit different, a bit funky that might turn out well. And a lot of chefs really like to be able to be a bit more creative and do something a bit different that nobody's really seen. So it's good to work with them. And then I get ideas from some places I hear they'll have a dish like that they had 4 years ago and they had some strange like flavor combination. They'll go, I've seen this before, why don't you try it out?
The early bird doesn't just get the worm. It also gets the best wild herbs and plants. Liam talks us through a typical day.
Basically, I wake up an hour and a half, 2 hours before the sun even rises, just to get, because we pick fresh every day for our restaurants. So we wake up, basically put in all our paperwork and get everything ready. And then first, like when the sun first comes up, we basically out picking straight away. So we have all different spots. So we have we have 4 different pickers going to all different locations. So we have one that stays on the farm at Warrandyte, which is where we keep a lot of our like older plants, just because we've been there for the longest. So things like our mountain marigolds and a lot more established things are down there. And then we also have one person going wild foraging near Warrandyte because it's a lot lower to ocean. So it's a bit warmer there and it's a bit more, you get slightly different things from Sylvan. So we have that. And then we have a picker at the farm at Sylvan, which is a lot of our greens and flowers now. And then I'm normally going out and doing like the big forages of like the bulk things or the slightly harder to find things. So we do that we normally pick for about 2.5 hours in the morning. And then we take everything back to our packing shed, and then we basically pack everything, and then we're on the road from about 9:30, 10 o'clock, because we deliver to all restaurants ourselves as well. So we're a full service. So I'm up at 5 a.m. and then on the road till 3-4 o'clock. And then it's basically get back, organize the next day, and then make sure everything at the farm's like all watered, and just do all the bits and pieces during the day. So it's pretty full on, and we do it 5 days a week delivering, and then because I've got the farm now, it's basically a 7-day job. So always up and around doing something at least when I'm around. So we just walk around we have like black crates, and we have basically our containers. So we walk around with our stack of containers of what we need for the day, because we like pick fresh every day for the restaurants. We pick just what we need, so we don't have any wastage. So we make sure we do that, and basically we just walk around, pick all we need, and then pack it all away straight away, and then basically just go to all our different patches and do the same thing. So we have it all packed fresh into the container. We go back, if it's a bit dirty, we give it a rinse, and then have it packed and straight in the cars. So basically what the restaurants get, if you're having lunch at midday at some of the restaurants we supply, that's been picked at 8 a.m. that day.
Farming is hard enough, but by its very nature, foraging encounters more variables. Whether it's wallabies, rain or snakes, there are always challenges.
The weather's the big one, especially this year because we've had an insane amount of rain. So basically the whole thing with that is if we have a damaged product or something, I can call up a restaurant and suggest something, a replacement for them, like something similar or that. We find where we are, we don't really see that many people because our patches are a bit more hidden, just because we explore and go a bit deeper. But it's normally the wildlife, it's a bit, you can encounter some pretty cool things sometimes. Like near my farm, we walk out the back to go get some things near the dam, and every morning there's wallabies just jumping around. Or if we're down in Warradite, you have to keep an eye out in like the really hot weather. We normally don't send people out just because of snakes and that kind of thing. So it's the big two things are weather and wildlife.
Over a dozen years of business, Spurrell Foraging has expanded from an offering of around 10 ingredients to a list of 200 plus. Even so, the journey is just beginning, as Liam and his team discover more ingredients and chefs continue to open their minds and experiment.
So basically back then, I was getting 10, maybe 15 things, and that's all I really knew. Because to be honest, to this day, I don't really know a whole lot about farming and everything and growing, just because I'm a trained chef. All my farming techniques are all just self-taught and experimenting. So we do that, but I'm finding that every year people chefs, they always want something new, something a bit different. So it's always my job to just try and keep up and try and come up with something new and something a bit stranger, a bit more different to actually show chefs. So I find that since then, which was 2010-ish, the amount of ingredients, from 2010 there was 10, 15 ingredients people used, maybe 20. And then from there to about 2014, you get it up to about 40 different native or something a bit stranger. And then right now, on our list, we have at least 200 items. So it's always just people have this and then they want more. And it's all just, as well, we're still just discovering uses for all the natives and all that kind of thing, and discovering what they are and how actually good they are and how to actually use them. So I think that's the big thing. It's just, we have to just try and keep up and actually showing everyone all the native ingredients, because we show someone and they'll try it and they'll be like, yeah, we'll think about how to do this. And then 6 months later, they have an idea, and then that dish won't come on for another 6 months until it's back in season. And it's basically always just playing catch up. So it's always just expanding slowly and slowly, but it's actually, everyone's just in the past 2-3 years, especially since COVID, everyone's just wanting to try all the natives, all the things a bit different. And it's just actually been really good over that time to actually showcase what ingredients are actually out there.
Whatever you do, don't call them micro herbs. Liam explains the difference.
A lot of people used to think that my stuff was basically just garnish, and it was basically equivalent to microherbs, which is one thing I despise. Like, I can't stand microherbs because the whole thing is basically you grow a plant to 2 centimeters and cut it off. It doesn't have a chance to develop any flavor or anything. So, and like our whole thing is we grow the plant, like get the seeds and replant, so we have a consistent product. We're finding that people actually understand that it's not just a piece of green or like that kind of thing. It's actually got a flavor and it's actually got a purpose to actually be on the plates. So it's one of those, just it's more education, and it's the customers are getting more educated nowadays too. So it's just not like you don't get customers that see a little bit of garnish and flick it off anymore. They just leave it on and go, that must be part of the dish, which is actually getting quite refreshing, because it used to be like you'd put something on the plate and like we'd have things like our native mint and everything that it's got like a little bit of a eucalyptus taste to it and all that. The people just take off and then it just flattens the dish. So it's just a lot of education and people actually understanding that like people are using things for a reason.
The hills are alive with plants yet to be harvested, and the farm is a work in progress. Whatever else it will be, the future is sure to be busy as Liam continues foraging, harvesting and educating.
Not really, it's just more we're always working on like new products, as I was saying, but we're also working on trying to build our farm at Sylvan, because it's 18.5 acres. We're just trying to eventually build it to become a like little weekend, like day trip, little area to come to for like groups of chefs and that kind of thing, just so they can actually come and understand what, like how things actually grow. Because a lot of people there's delivery straight to their door. Like they never go out, never see where it comes from, never see how it grows and don't know how it is. So we're actually slowly putting our farm up to become a bit more of a educational experience too for everyone. So that's one of our big goals we're trying to plant out like a little native forest that will be about 2 acres and really go out and show people like how growing this kind of thing actually works. It's basically just to give the ingredient a bit more respect, because I remember when I was in kitchens, like I know like the McConnell Group, which is Cutler & Co and all that, they have used to have little education days. So every second Monday they'd have one of the suppliers come out and talk about like their product. And whenever I went to them, it was always something that like you don't really know the product. Like you can read about it all you want until you actually see it. And then you actually have a bit more respect and a bit more like imagination to actually use it and things like that, which I find is a lot more, I always found it interesting. And I know a lot of chefs really love coming out and actually seeing like how it works and where everything comes from. So just one of those things, just I loved it when I was working. So I'm sure there are other people that will too.
Being in nature is a daily joy for Liam Spurrell. What else does he love about what he does?
It's more probably the freedom of just being able to do basically what I want to do kind of thing. So it's, at the end of the day, I'm my own boss at the end. So I can do that. And then like building out the farm, because I live on the farm now, just being able to wake up every day and realize where I am and that kind of thing is just waking up and actually realizing that I live in a place that's quiet and I can actually work at kind of my own pace. We always still have to be rushed to actually get everything out. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I can be me when I do it.
As a former chef who grew up connected to nature, Liam is the perfect person to bridge the gap between foraged bounty and the way it's used in restaurants. Alongside key partnerships with native ingredient producers, he's part of a force making restaurant food more interesting, delicious, and connected to the local environment. This is The Producers, a Deep in the Weeds production. I'm Dani Valent. Stay tuned as we talk to some of Australia's best farmers, makers and growers. Follow us on Instagram at Producers Podcast or contact us via deepintheweeds.com.au.